This morning, I'm returning to reading Transactionalism, an Historical and Interpretive Study by Trevor J. Phillips. I intend to finish Chapter 2, covering William James and Meade. William James. From the voluminous writings of William James, in his capacity as both psychologist and philosopher, there emerge two concepts which have had significant influence on contemporary transactional thought. They are the datum, or pure experience, and the theory of double-barreledness. James maintained that the physical order and the mental order actually overlap in common phenomena, or pure experience. In literal terms, the mind incorporates into itself elements which belong simultaneously to the physical, external world. James labeled pure experience the instant field of the present, which as yet is only potentially either object or subject. For the time being, it is unqualified actuality or existence, a simple that. A case study cited by James helps illuminate further this concept of pure experience. The study was an amnesia victim who, upon recovering consciousness following an accident, identified the movements of a nearby orderly with those of his own. The ability to discriminate between his own body and the environment was lacking. Such experiences point to a primitive stage of perception in which discriminations afterwards needful have not yet been made. A piece of experience of a determinate sort is there, but there at first as a pure fact. Motion originally simply is, only later is it confined to this thing or that. Something like this is true of every experience, however complex. At the moment of its actual presence, it is a pure experience, a phenomenon or datum, a mere that, or content or fact. For James, subjectives and objectives, inners and outers, are actually names for two groups into which each individual sorts his experiences. For him to employ such figures of speech was to resort to a way of talking, and not to a way of stating facts. To state that subjectives and objectives are entities in and of themselves would have been to fall victim to the paradox that has existed from at least the time of Democritus, that what is evidently one reality should be in two places at once, but in outer space and in a person's mind. The representative theories of perception violate one's sense of life, which knows no intervening mental image but seems to view the external world immediately just as it physically exists. What James was saying then was that unfragmented experience can play the role of a knower, of a state of mind, of consciousness on the one hand, and on the other, and in a different context, the same undivided portion of experience can become a thing known, an objective content. Hence, we have every right to speak of it as subjective and objective both at once. This ability of the term experience to play twin roles and the dualism that the term connotes moved James to apply the adjective double-barreled to it. This contrasts sharply with single-barreled terms such as thought and thing, which are so often hypostatized beyond any possibility of empirical probing, and which become firmly transformed into substances and isolated from inquiry's probe. This concept of double-barreledness is of prime importance to the later transactional theory. It accepts the interdependence of aspects of experience. It is a linguistic reflection of fact. James, as quoted in a previous paragraph, accused the representative theories of perception of employing intervening mental images as intermediaries. In another place, he used the phrase, that third group of associates, to describe the same practice. It has been observed that the continued use of these intervening elements or thirds results in the appearance of two inexplicable gaps, one between subject and third, and the other between the third and the object. Transactionalism eschews the belief in and reliance upon intervening entities. asserting that such a belief and reliance are not compatible with the view that process and product, in this case knowings and knowns, are everywhere inseparable. James anticipated this orientation. He stated the case very neatly when he wrote, "Is the preciousness of a diamond a quality of the gem, or is it a feeling in our mind? Practically, we treat it as both, or as either, according to the temporary direction of our thought. The experienced and the experiencing, the seen and the seeing, are in actuality only names for a single fact." Mead. In earlier sections of the present chapter, an attempt was made to show A, that the genius of Darwin was able to bring both organism and environment into a unifying system by taking a new and unique look at the concept of nature. B, that Peirce's vision led him to apply this approach across a wide range of human knowings and to identify sign as the unit of procedure. And C, that James had succeeded in bringing the datum or pure experience naturalistically into view. In the present section, an examination of George Herbert Mead's contextualism will be undertaken. It will be seen that he concentrated chiefly upon the relation of knowing to its actual situation or context, on the relation, that is, of the organism to its environment, and that he came closer perhaps to modern transactional theory than either Peirce or James. For Mead, the unit of experience is the act. It is the basic ongoing event, an impulse that through the selection of certain specific needed stimuli maintains the life process. Thus, the organism creates its environment. Mead contrasted his own scientific methodology with the thought of the ancient world, stating that, in his opinion, it is freedom of action which must be postulated as the condition of formulating ends towards which conduct shall be directed. The end of inquiry may not be formulated in advance of knowledge of the means to acquire it. What the world is, what meaning it has for a particular observer, depends upon the determination at a particular moment in time of the conditions of the solution of the given problems. It is these very problems, Mead insisted, that constitute the conditions under which conduct is carried out. Of prime importance is Mead's assertion that the ends of conduct or inquiry can be determined only to the degree that the possibilities which changing conditions carry with them are realized. The creative powers of the ordinary person are proclaimed as follows. The individual in his experience is continually creating a world which becomes real through his discovery. In the sentence is to be found the direct implication that the process of knowing occurs only in a situation, and that knowledge itself is dependent upon the situation in which it occurs. That is to say, truth and knowledge are relative to the context. The reflective experience, the world, and the things within it exist in the form of situations. These situations are fundamentally characterized by the relation of an organic individual to his environment or world. If this relationship between organism and environment is accepted, then, within such a relationship, nothing may be taken as fixed, certain, or independent. The dependence of the organism upon the environment is matched by that of the environment upon the organism. Concepts and procedures pertain only to specific situations. For Mead, experimental science recognizes objects as existing and coming into being in situations which he defined as things in such a relationship with one another that they maintain or tend to maintain that relationship. The individual must be viewed as existing within a single process in which the problem and the hypothesis for its solution are formulated. This individual is one who, although functioning in his full particularity, is yet in organic relationship with the society that is responsible for him. The interaction of society and individual is a two-way process in the course of which the former both acts upon and reacts to the individual, and the latter both acts upon and reacts to society. In summary, Mead represented the view commonly referred to as the pragmatic attitude, which beholds the world as an implication of the scientific method of discovery, with the entire abstraction from epistemological or metaphysical presuppositions or complications. For him, the eternal verities and secure and sacred structures of the metaphysical world no longer harbor the values to which man may subscribe. Instead, they provide good working materials in the hypothetical studies of science on condition of surrendering their metaphysical reality. Thus, what was merely inchoate in the researchings of Galileo in the 17th century had most assuredly gained momentum by the 20th. A preliminary definition. In the preceding section, those segments of the pragmatic inheritance of transactionalism were reviewed which have contributed most to the growth of the transactional point of view. In general, the pragmatic base carries the implication that the world is in an unfinished state, that it is still, as Darwin asserted, in the making. Of prime significance for the present study is the fact that each man is seen individually and cooperatively as one of its makers. This, then, is the common thread which the pragmatic antecedents of the transactional point of view illuminate: the role of man as participator in the construction of his own destiny. A destiny he is constantly in the process of defining and redefining through dynamic interaction with his fellow man and with the outside world. It will have become evident that any attempt to define transaction in philosophical terms must include implications provided in the development of science and the scientific method. The self-actional, interactional, and transactional concepts were indeed guideposts discovered along the lengthy and oftentimes tortuous journey made by science through the annals of history. It has already been shown how these three views of scientific phenomena are related and how they produced theories of scientific inquiry that are opposed to one another. To conclude the present chapter, a preliminary definition of transaction will be attempted. It is, of necessity, preliminary, because a more mature statement requires the utilization of information and material to be presented in Chapter 3. That chapter will, therefore, present a more exhaustive definition than is possible at the present time. Viewed in its philosophical dimension, transaction denotes a reciprocal relationship between that which acts and that which is acted upon. In this relationship, both become united for the moment in a mutual transition or transaction. It is a process in which both are reciprocally transformed. That is to say, the nature of the change each undergoes is affected by the presence and influence of the other. The relationship forms a bond of unity which contradicts any absolute separation or isolation, which, to anticipate the succeeding chapter, is imposed by dualistic categories. The foregoing review of the historical development of this mode of thought and interpretation of action was, indeed, an account of how phenomena came to be viewed less as the behavior of static entities and mutual isolates, and more as aspects of events in the process of becoming. A transaction, then, is a creative act, engaged in by one who, by virtue of his participation in the act, of which he is always an aspect, never an entity, together with the other participants, be they human or otherwise environmental, becomes in the process modified. A characteristic trait of the transactional approach to inquiry has its origin in the contributions of Darwin. This trait concerns the taking of men and their behaviors as natural phenomena as contrasted with the supernatural. A consequence of this is the realization that the place in time and space which man occupies as a human being instead of as a superhuman being drastically curtails his powers to know. Human knowledge, therefore, relates to the transactional situation in which man is constantly participating. In point of fact, knowledge, and this fact will be enlarged upon in the final chapter of the study, is itself a transaction between man and the world he is desirous of knowing. This, then, is the natural environment. Man's understandings are finite as opposed to infinite. In the same way, his views, goals, commitments, and beliefs have relative status as opposed to absolute. Finally, it may be said that with the pragmatic heritage behind it, a heritage that includes the doctrines of continuity and fallibilism, pure experience, and the double-barreledness of certain phenomena, the transactional approach is truly an attempt to include man, a natural organism, as an integral component in those investigations and inquiries which seek to enlarge his knowledge. This inclusion does not concern itself solely with man's efforts to discover what already is, but is based on the assertion that what man seeks in his environment may only be interpreted in terms of man, in terms of the observer himself. Experiencing, including inquiring, is a process of creating and becoming. In the next chapter, the contributions of John Dewey and Arthur F. Bentley to transactional theory will be detailed within a general description of contemporary transactionalism, and an attempt will be made to indicate the current significance of the movement in the realm of philosophy. And that concludes Chapter 2.